First of all, thank you so much for being a welcoming uh, neighbor to us. Thank you so much. I always say that Denver is a welcoming community, and we are so lucky that we ended up in Denver. And thank you so much for being with us through our journey here in the US. Yes, thank you so much, Stan. Your son gave that introduction. Well, if I say that I'm a forcibly displaced person, that's true. We are forcibly displaced people from our home country, Afghanistan, which everything just changed only in one overnight on August 15, 2021, after 20 years of all those hard-working efforts and struggles for a better future for that country and for the children of that country and for the new generation of that country, everything just changed. I always say everything turned into the ashes only in 24 hours. That's not only the story of me and my family. That's the story of the thousands of Afghans who raised, grown up, and also they studied, they went to the schools, they went to the universities in the last 20 years with a big hope of being a part of that country, a big part of the nation building for a country which was for 40 years, almost 42 years in conflict. And we were always counted as a conflict zone. Yes, I put that on the papers. I'm sorry for my accent, if my accent is a little bit different. I'm a forcibly displaced person who fled my country fearing revenge. Yes, revenge of the prosecution, revenge of the torture, and also even arrest and to be killed by the Taliban under the name of being an ally of the USG in Afghanistan for last 20 years, or let's be specific, for last 16 years of my work with the US Embassy in Afghanistan, with the USG organizations in Afghanistan, and also for the United Nations Development Program in different capacities. I have grown up in the war. Yes, when I was born, it was the Soviet invasion time in Afghanistan. That was the time when Soviet invaded Afghanistan. And then I grown up in the war. Through all the years, we grown up the time that there was like the rockets were flying over our heads, and then we were going to the schools. And then the first era of the Taliban occupation in Afghanistan, where we were seeing people were hanged from the trees. That was the time that I was a middle schooler and then a high schooler. So, and then I studied in that country. I went to the university, and then I started to work for that country in the middle of the battleground in every corner of the country. I almost traveled to 36,000 out of 40,000 villages of Afghanistan, because that was my work being part of the local economic development team. So I traveled village by village, sometimes walking from one village to another village, sometimes driving, and sometimes we were riding horses to travel from one village to another village because of the access to the roads. There were lack of access to the roads. We were able to provide the people with the roads, access to the to the transportation facilities, access to the health clinics, access to the education centers like schools. So for the 10 years, this was my job. you know, but I had to finally leave that country with all those achievements. I had to leave Afghanistan with all the sorrows, but I'm not regretting my work for the people. I was just talking to Bob and Jim that a couple of weeks ago I got a call from a very far remote village of Afghanistan from a farmer. The farmer found my US number from a friend. He goes all up to the mountains to find a place for the network. And also he WhatsApp me, and then he calls me and said, thank you so much, Milad, for all the great things that you did for us in our village. That's a big honor of my life. That's the biggest reward that I have received from my community. And I'm so thankful for him calling me in the middle of the night and waking me up in the middle of the night. Well, everything just changed into ashes in only 24 hours. And my family, my wife, my 3 kids and I, plus my colleagues from the USIP, had to leave the country just on the 26th of the August. Maybe you have heard the big bomb blast in front of Kabul airport killed 13 Marines and 207 civilians on that day. We have been just evacuated on the same day. We were maybe just 100 feet away from that big bomb blast. We came all the way from Kabul to Kuwait, and from Kuwait to the Spain, spending under the tents, and then coming all the way to the US, and spending days and nights in New Mexico in the desert to get processed, security background check for every individual who ended up in the US, and then finally heading to their destinations. And I ended up in Denver because my sister lives here for almost 5 years now, and she is a dentist. Yeah. Well, I have a message from my sister as well today. My sister is a senior student at Kabul University. It has been like 6 months that they are banned from going to the universities. Maybe you have heard from the media. Women and girls are banned to go to the schools, to go to the universities, and go to the work. So today I also have a message from her. Let's raise our voices for the sake of the Afghan girls and women. Put pressure on the international community to kind of rewrite their agreement with the Taliban government, letting the girls and women to go to work in the schools and universities. That's actually the message from my sister, my little sister, who is banned from the university now in Kabul. Well, we have started everything from the scratch here in the United States, in Denver. When we arrived in Denver, we came only with one backpack, and that one backpack even lost in Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. Yes, we never got back that backpack. But Firoza made everything from the scratch. Firoza is my wife. All credit goes to her because she was a big supporter of me during all these difficult times. For me, as a person who was working with the government, with the US Embassy, and having all those credentials back home, and losing everything only in 24 hours, that was so difficult to readjust myself. But that was Firoza supported me all this way. And now kind of I'm again standing on my feet and finding my way. So yes, we ended up in Denver with only one backpack, and that backpack was lost. We came here only with one of the blankets that we got from the ICRC, International Committee for Red Cross, in the New Mexico, and she brought that with herself because she wanted to keep that for our future. Maybe sometime, some days, we were in some place, and then she reminds our bad days, traveling all the way from Kabul to the US and ending up in Denver with only blanket from ICRC. She kept that. Yes. And I have also another story behind that. If time allows, then I can tell you that story as well. Well, now coming to the challenges of every refugee. Challenges are different for every person. I quoted one thing from Harari. I don't know if you have heard about, you all know Harari, who is the writer of the 21 Lessons of the 21st Century and the Homo sapiens and the Homo Deus. He is a good history writer, and I love his books. So he says in his book, 21 Lessons of the 21st Century, a single mother is struggling to raise 2 children in a Mumbai slum is focused on where she will find their next meal. Refugees in a boat in the middle of the Mediterranean scan the horizon for any signs of land. A dying man in the overcrowded London hospital gathers all his remaining strength to take in one more breath. The challenges for every refugee individual and family is entirely different. So that was my story. We have thousands of other stories, the same stories. On the other hand, the unprecedented increase in forced displacement due to regional conflicts and global climate change draws attention to identifying innovative approaches to support locally driven solutions, strengthen resilience, and forge a more responsive action. Greater coordination and collaboration among the active global and local players at all levels and leveraging our respective roles will advance the development and programmatic efforts. I know thousands of people are struggling with the language barrier. Some refugee families don't know how to pay their monthly rent and are evicted from their homes due to a lack of knowledge. Some people in the refugee community still don't know how to follow up with their kids' school. Still some people in our refugee communities miss their appointments in the hospitals and clinics due to a lack of understanding of the bureaucratic procedures. Of course, there are people still fighting cultural shock, and these challenges are like a spider web surrendered to our newly arrived refugees. Greater coordination and collaboration among local civil society, community leaders, academics, and the private sector towards refugee responses leverage to advance the development and programmatic efforts. Let me take this discussion to my role as a community sponsorship coordinator in IRC, at IRC in Denver. I always say that IRC is traditionally and historically doing the resettlement job for the years and the years. But one part is missing with the IRC work. What's that part? What's that missing part? That missing part is to give a feeling of love and passion to our new neighbors, to our new families, to our refugee community, not to feel strange in their new neighborhood. That's missing, that part is missing. And we are complementing that part with giving fun, love, and passion. I always compare that to a kitchen where mom is cooking for the kids. When a mom is cooking for the kids, that's always delicious. That's not comparable with the food we are eating in a restaurant, because mom include love and passion to the food and giving to the kids. That exactly applies to our role as a community member to our new neighbors. I always call them not refugees, not immigrants, but new neighbors. Let's give them that feeling and hope. And I know every one of us is doing that. And that's why I'm always saying, welcome, Denver is a welcoming community, and thanks to all our Denver people. And I thank on behalf of our refugee community, because I felt now Denver is home. I have come through this journey of the community sponsorship now for 1.5 years. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from my community. I learned a lot from my people. And that's what. If you don't have the support of our local community, a refugee family or individual may thrive, but maybe take years and years. What make them thrive as soon as possible? Our community support. And that's what I have experienced. A couple of months ago, I got a Colombian family with no single English word. Yesterday, when I was talking with our group lead in Arvada, the family is kind of, now they're working. And they speak little words, little language. And I said, that's a sign of progress. That's a sign. The mom, because she's a single mom with 3 kids, the mom is working, and one of the kids is working. 2 others are going to the high school and middle school, primary school, elementary, but they're working. And they're making their life here in the US. That's a sign of progress. And that's why, if we as IRC were helping them, maybe we were helping them with only 90 days of that reception and placement program. But now they got all the community members around them and supporting them day to day, every single moment. They're in contact, they're in touch with the family if they need anything. So that's what our community role means. And I know these all support a changing narrative. I'm coming from 2 back-to-back meetings from DC and Baltimore. 1 week was the Refugee Advocacy Days, talking to the senators and representatives. I was able to talk to 4 senators, and of course our representatives. I always saying to them, refugees are assets. Refugees are not liabilities. Refugees bring more than they carry. They may come here with only 1 backpack, but they carry a lot here. They bring capacity to this country, to this state, and to this community. So let's take them as an asset, and let's invest on them. Let's utilize the potential resource, these potential resources and the capacities. And that's kind of a changing narrative, I think. Refugees are not a liability. They are an asset to this country. We know that every one of us is coming from a different background. Let's share our capacity with them, and let's transfer our knowledge with them. And that's what we can do. At least that's what we can do. I learned a lot from Stan, from Bob, from Carol, from Jim, from Judy. Judy is here today. I met her a couple of months ago while she is collecting all these in-kind donations in her garage and then giving it to IRC. I learned that from Judy I learned that kindness. I learned a lot from Stan and from other colleagues. From Marsha Cantor, who is our community sponsorship ambassador in Nevada, United Women of Faith. And I am learning every day from our community members. So let's transfer our knowledge. And with saying that, you have some flyers on your tables, some informational materials from the program. Maybe you can read that. We gave you some options. Any option you like, just please help us and please help our new neighbors and new families. They need you. And tomorrow, their kids and the new generation will appreciate us and appreciate you and appreciate all of us. I know time is always, there is a Kazik proverb that chess is a lot, time is gold. We know time is gold. But we gave that gold to that family. And then we get a lot back. When see their capacities are built, when see they are thriving, when see they are moving forward, when see they are seeing themselves in the future of this country, that's the give back of that family. I always encourage my 3 kids, okay, one, you go to the School of Mines in Colorado. One, go and study computer science. One, go and be a doctor. Tomorrow back in this community. And that's your give back to this community by serving the people of the Colorado, or all Coloradans. Thank you so much. So I would stop here, and then I'm open to any question, and then very happy to answer your questions.
Hello, and thank you for coming to speak to us. How many people are now coming out of Afghanistan as refugees to the U.S. or to other countries? Do you know?
Good question. That really depends, because you know that 12,000 special immigrant visa holders are left behind. And the majority of these 12,000 people don't have the chance going out of the country because of the ban on their travels, because of their arrest, prosecution, torture, and killings. Many of them died and killed by the Taliban during last 1.5 years. But still people are trying to get out of the country to Pakistan or maybe to Turkey and then make their way to the US. We don't have exact figure for them, but every day people are traveling outside of the Afghanistan to reach to Pakistan, Islamabad, or India, or in Turkey to get their documents processed. Because you know, the vetting process, I mean the security background check and the biometrics by the State Department is so lengthy, so complicated. People have to wait for the years and years to get vetted or security background check by the State Department. Out of thousands, many of them, very few of them, are landing on the US soil. But we don't have the exact figure. But during the evacuation, 76,000 out of 125,000 people evacuated from Afghanistan landed here in the US. And now the 76,000 people are struggling with the legal pathway in the US. That's why we are always now fighting for the Afghan Adjustment Act, and we call the support of our senators and representatives to support and co-sponsor the Afghan Adjustment Act to find the legal pathway for our Afghan community, because if they go through the asylum process, it takes years and years, 2 years, 3 years. And then after that, they have to go for their adjustment process. And that adjustment process takes years and years. That's why we want to make that process short and also technically and operationally, and make it feasible to everybody who landed in this country. Yes.
Two quick questions. One of which is, are we still bringing people from Afghanistan? But number two, people I'm sure are coming in with educations and specific skills. Are we able to find and match those skills into our vocations here?
Thank you so much, Jim. You know, let me share one thing with you. The people are privileged who are landing in the US soil. And that's based on my experience working in the European countries. And also, I worked for 2 years in Vienna, in Austria. I was involved with the refugees' life in Vienna. I know how they were struggling with the job and employment. But there, I mean, our new arrivals and our new community members are so lucky because the resettlement agencies and our welcoming communities are trying to match the very close jobs to our new arrivals. It's an emerging economy and it's an emerging employment market. So we are trying our best to match the closest to their capacity. And the people, why I'm saying the people are privileged who are landing on the US soil or in the US, because the US provide more opportunities than the European countries. For instance, if an engineer back home, they were a civil engineer, when they come here, at least they are employed in some sort of the working, jobs that matches at least their education background or their background in Afghanistan. One of the examples is myself. When I ended here, I didn't know where I will go, where the future will take me. But considering of my 16 years involvement in the community development as a community development practitioner, so I found this job, community sponsorship coordinator, and then IRC hired me as a community sponsorship coordinator, which was so close to my previous background. And the same for many other people that they are matched with their background back home, or either that was like working background or their education.
Next question is here.
Question for you about the Taliban. How strong is the Taliban in terms of how many people support the Taliban in Afghanistan? And what's your hope for the future of Afghanistan?
A very great question. Thank you so much for bringing up this question. Taliban is not strong, but you know what's strong? The narrative that they have created made them strong. Let me share you one experience. You can see on my that introduction about myself. I was implementing one of the United States Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs project called Community-Based Agriculture and Rural Development. They give me $10 million. That's an example, my lived experience. They give me $10 million at the beginning of this project and told me, okay, Milad, you have to choose 3 provinces for piloting this project with highly poppy cultivation. I said, okay, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I shared that background with Jim and Bob and Carol before. US has spent $8.5 billion over counter narcotics in Afghanistan, by the way. But that increased from 3% to 78% in 15 years. Maybe you have heard about a province called Helmand in the south. Helmand is in the south, just one province neighbor to Kandahar, the second biggest US base in Afghanistan, and that was called Helmand. And the military base was built in Helmand, was called Bastion, which there were troops from 3 countries, Netherlands, US Marines, and the UK Royal Forces. 3 countries. Plus 8,000 of these forces, plus 12,000 of the Afghan National Army forces. 12,000. Now, 20,000 forces with the Humvees, with the tanks, with the drones, with the F-16s, with the B-52, M4s, M16s, artilleries, everything. How many districts? Helmand has 14 districts. 14 districts. Troops, 20,000 troops with everything, all the equipment. Taliban numbers, 2,000. What were the Taliban's equipment? One motorcycle, Japanese Honda motorbike, one AK-47, or maybe the biggest one RPG. That was their weaponry and artillery. But these Taliban defeated 20,000 of these forces. And the poppy cultivation never decreased in that province. Why? Because the Taliban created a strong narrative among the local community. And that narrative made the Taliban so strong. While we, on the another side, on the Republic side, on the international community side, we were not able to create that narrative. We were not able to create that narrative of the community support. 2000 defeated 20,000 of the armed forces. And their strong point is the narrative that they have created at the grassroots level. That's why I always say creating narrative is so important. US government on the front, and then the international, 52 of other international countries, they were not able to create part of that narrative that Taliban created at the grassroots in Afghanistan, and of course today in other parts of the country where the US presence are. We are failed. We as the US government failed in creating a good narrative at the grassroots level to attract the support of the local community.
The second part of the question, Milad, was what is your hope for the future?
I'm hopeful for the future of Afghanistan. Taliban cannot resist against the wants of the local people and the citizens. Taliban will go today or tomorrow. This is my word. I always say this. Taliban will go today or tomorrow because the approach, the mentality, the ideology is not correct. It's not right. And that's not acceptable to the people of 21st century, especially the people who are living in the era of the technology. That's not acceptable. And Taliban is from the dark age, their mentality. They will go one day or tomorrow. One, or they will be absorbed, melted into the community. While I was working with the United States of Peace, Institute of Peace, and we were involved in the peace talks, intra-Afghan peace talks. One of our approaches, bring the Taliban from the mountains and deserts to the cities. They will melt. They will see the new culture. They will see the modernity. They will see the young generation, and they will be melted into those communities. But what's important, the tomorrow of the Taliban going away. That's important. Because we have experienced 20 years of democracy and the international community presence in Afghanistan with the millions and billions of dollars and trillions of dollars. A lot of investment. But we failed. How we are going to be built based on the lessons learned from the last 20 years. And that's how we pitch always to our neighbors, to the citizen, and to our representatives, to our government people, and to our decision makers. Let's learn from the lessons learned from the last 20 years and do not build on the failures that we had experienced the last 20 years in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in Syria or in other countries. Let's find a good approach, a new approach. Let's make it more people-centered. Let's make it more people on the front lead of the decision. Do not make it always a top-down. Make it bottom-up approach as well.
Milad, you said in the beginning of your speech that if you had time, you had another story to tell. We do have time, and we would love your story.
Thank you so much for giving me that time. Yes, that's the story. Another side. Sorry for talking too much. Afghanistan has 18 ethnic tribes. 18 ethnic tribes. Big tribes, ethnics, and the minority. I come from a minority community or ethnic groups where 71% of my ethnic group was massacred and genocide by one of the Afghanistan kings back in 1890s. 21% of these people fled Afghanistan, only 7% of these people remained in Afghanistan. And I am the remainder of that generation. So while I'm saying that let's build capacities and everything, I remember the day that you have heard about the white supremacy, right? Maybe in a different approach in Afghanistan. One of my coworkers was coming from the first grade community or first top level community. And he told me, we were discussing about one of the biggest Spanish funded projects in Afghanistan, a water dam. Oh well, we were always doing brainstorming for the project's implementation. And I brought that one big idea, which this person didn't like it. And he was kind of so frustrated with the idea because my idea was opposing his idea while my idea was a good idea against his idea. And you know what he told me? Milad. He didn't say Milad. He gave my tribe's name. And he said, because I'm coming from Hazara community in Afghanistan. And maybe if you Google that, Hazaras are genocided in Afghanistan. And then he told me, Hazara, shut up. I said, why? You know why? Because still your people are doing the very low income, we call it, for example, this, I don't know what they call it in English, this, the people who are putting loads on their shoulders and carry. I don't know. What? Something like that. Yeah. Yes, manual laborers. Because back in the maybe 30, 40 years, our generation, were hired by the top level community only for the sake of doing the manual jobs. They were not allowed to go to the schools. Actually, my tribe, my ethnic group, were not allowed to go to the schools. We were not allowed to work in the government. We were not allowed to go in the forces, in the army. The only right that we had to breathe and also to work manually in the farms as a slave. And they were calling us slaves. And then he told me, Hazara, you're still a slave. And then I told him, yes. I thank and I appreciate my slavery that today I am talking to you face to face and I am doing the arguments on the biggest project of maybe millions of dollars worth millions and millions dollars. I'm arguing with you. And every day when I go out of home, I just go and kiss that rope that I was doing the manual job from my grandfather and then come to the work because I don't want to forget that dark era and dark age of myself and my ancestors and grandma and grandpa, and then to struggle and to work hard and hard for a better tomorrow and a better future for my kids and my new generation. And that's related, thank you so much. That's actually related to that story when Feroza, we came from New Mexico, and she got that blanket of ICRC, and then she told me that I will keep this. Maybe tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 100 years later, when your son and kids and grandson will go somewhere and will be somewhere, and they should not ever forget the day that they have arrived in the US. And that means they should not ever forget to help others in need. That's her logic behind that blanket. Thank you.
Milad, you have shared with us how we could get involved locally with the International Rescue Committee, how we might get it change done at the state level with legislation. But what should the United States government do or the international community do to help the people in Afghanistan?
Good question. Number one, advocacy and bringing words and raising voices always work. If one of us raised voice from Denver, another one of us raised voice, for example, from California, and one from UK, one from Germany, that kind of put pressure on the regime in Afghanistan to hear and listen to the voices of the millions of the girls who are left behind the doors of the closed doors of the schools. Raising our voices and advocating for those who are left behind, and especially for the women and girls who are left behind of the closed doors of their works in schools in Afghanistan, that means a lot. Second, with the legislators, always do not forget Afghans as their closest allies in the 21st century. Because, you know what we know as a USG, we just jump from one emergency to another emergency. This is what we have learned. Afghanistan was an emergency, right? 2001 after 9/11, war against the terrorism. And we dispatched troops, forces, to Afghanistan to fight or combat against the terrorism in Afghanistan. And we withdrew from Afghanistan with 2,600 deaths and also with a lot of other casualties, spending $3 trillion in Afghanistan, but what? Failed. And then we jumped to another emergency, Iraq. We brought our troops to Iraq. Okay, go and fight against the Saddam to find this nuclear weapon in, and we couldn't find that nuclear weapon in Iraq, and then we got back home. And then we jumped to another emergency called Syria. Thousands, millions of people fled from their country, displaced, forcibly displaced from Syria. They are now in the refugee camps in Turkey, in Lebanon, in other countries with no clear future. That's another emergency. And then Ukraine. Now we are involved in Ukraine. We have a lot of Ukrainians now arriving in this country. And then now, again, Guatemalans, Cubans, Haitians, the people who are waiting on the other side of the border to cross Mexican border and enter into the US soil. Title 42 is completed and finished. But now we are leaving them in a limbo. So we learned how to jump from one emergency to another emergency. Let's teach our legislators. Let's teach them. Teach them. Not talk to them. Let's teach them how to prevent jumping from one emergency to another emergency. Let's resolve one emergency and then go to another emergency. That's our biggest message to our legislators. I spoke that 2 weeks ago in DC with our legislators, Senator Bennett, Jason Crew, Helen, I always forget the name, and Representative Back. I said, let's learn how to not jump from one emergency to another emergency. That's the biggest thing that we can do for the welfare of the world people and in the third country especially.
Milad, you're going to have to help me with this, but I get a text from IRC whenever they want me to write to the Congress people about important issues. Can you tell everybody about that?
What to write to the Congress? 1, Afghan Adjustment Act. Let's write to them about the Afghan Adjustment Act. Let's tell them to co-sponsor the Afghan Adjustment Act, and let's not politicize the life of the thousands of the people who are in a limbo. Number one. Number two, the Refugee Protection Act, which gives a pathway and a protection to the thousands of the other refugees who are in limbo in a legal fight and battle in this country. And the third, not and, the third is about the more funding under the new deals for the new Americans. Third, and the fourth, let's put more efforts on the oversight on the federal government. Oversight means also budgeting, but plus monitoring and evaluation. Let's see how our federal and the state government is doing. Put more efforts on the oversight. And let giving them more resources. You know, the thousands of people are now, their process are left behind because of lack of the resources in the United States Citizenship and Immigration Bureau office. Services, USCIS services, yes. And the PRM and the ORR, Office of Refugee and Resettlement, because of the lack or shortage of the resources. Let's tell them, put more resources, put more efforts on the oversight, and let's the work get done. That's what we want from the Congress and from our representatives.
But IRC sends me texts to guide me on what to write about, you know.
That's Afghan Adjustment Act.
Okay, but can you tell the people how to get on that list?
Yes, so we can get you, if I have the telephone numbers for everybody, I can get you on that list, or I can share with you the link. So you just go there, sign up, and say that we need the community, we as a community need your support for the Afghan Adjustment Act. Let's not forget about the asylum seekers, because seeking asylum is a human right. It's not a crime. So we got that link from IRC. I can share that with you, Carol, and then maybe you can share with folks, everybody. I can share that link with you. So you can just sign a petition and send to IRC Way, and they will share that with the legislators, at the national level.
Thank you. Then let me ask you to please help and thank Milad for his speech tonight and sharing his experience.